high in the mountains, a village has endured relentless attacks from an S-rank Fenrir, forcing them to spend every last bit of their savings to hire an S-rank party for its defeat. The Flaming Dragonfang members stand among the world's strongest adventurers, each boasting their own unique abilities, but Kurt, who ducks behind a wall desperate to avoid injury. Yet the moment the Fenrir appears, it targets Kurt first, sending him flying through the air as he crashes down. The rest of the party prepares to engage and battle. Gulnova, the leader, instructs Bandana to hold the beast down, so she pulls out her wire and wraps it around the Fenrir. However, the creature's strength is overwhelming, and it hurls her into a wall. Fortunately, with a healer on their side, she's fully restored in seconds and quickly returns to the fight. She then anchors herself to a nearby tree, allowing Gulnova the perfect chance to target the Fenrir's head. He leaps into the air and ignites the beast with the flames of his magic blade. The villagers are overjoyed by Fenrir's defeat, and despite their poverty, throw a feast in honor of the party. However, Gulnova can't stand the shitty food and demands that Kurt cook him a proper meal instead. Bandana asks him for something special, since today marks their final chance to enjoy Kurt's cooking. Kurt doesn't quite grasp what they're trying to say, so he turns to Gulnova for clarification, and Gulnova tells him that starting today, he's being dismissed. Confused, Kurt asks if he did something wrong, but Gulnova explains that the issue isn't something Kurt did, but rather what he hasn't done, while Kurt takes care of the party's chores beyond that he's ineffective in battle. And since a party can only consist of 4 members, if they want to grow stronger, they have to replace Kurt with a powerful mage, someone capable of holding their own in combat. Kurt pleads with them to let him stay in the party, but Gulnova kicks him in the stomach because he is sick of listening to Kurt's whining. They don't need him anymore, and that's final. The following day, Kurt sets off from the village alone with no destination in mind and empty pockets. After some time, he reaches the city of Samala, now down to his last few coins, desperately in need of work. Spotting a work agency, he figures it's worth a try and steps inside, where the receptionist welcomes him. She asks whether he's there to hire help or seek employment himself. When Kurt explains he needs a job, she tells him there's an interview and aptitude test required. Before anything else, she requests some basic information: his name, age, and hometown. So he responds that he's Kurt Rockhands, years old, and he is from Haste Village in the Sheen Mountains. Kershell is surprised, having never heard of a village in those mountains, but she moves on and inquires about his work experience. Kurt explains that he was part of Flaming Dragonfang, though his role was limited to simple chores, and he was just suddenly fired. Kershell is taken aback when she learns that Kurt was once a member of an S-rank party, and even if his contributions were minimal, just having that party's name listed on his application will definitely boost his chances of landing a new job. Kurt is relieved to hear that, and now the only thing left is to complete the aptitude test so Kershell can assess his strengths and weaknesses in this world. Aptitudes are divine gifts bestowed by God, and if Kurt's fortunate, he might uncover a hidden talent today. These aptitudes are ranked from G rank all the way up to triples rank, and the gap between each level is massive. Someone with a D rank sword skill would struggle just to swing a blade, while someone with an A rank sword skill could effortlessly cleave a rock in two. Kurt can't wait to discover if he has any hidden talent, but his excitement quickly fades when he sees that every combat skill on his sheet is ranked at the lowest possible level, G rank. It's clear he'll never qualify for a combat job, crushing his hopes instantly. However, Kershell reassures him that he might still excel in a trade skill like alchemy or blacksmithing. There's just one problem: the technician who administers those tests is away right now, so Kurt will need to return next week for his evaluation. Kurt tells her he won't last that long because he doesn't have enough money to hold out until then, so he really needs to find a job today. Kershell understands Kurt's situation, so she asks him to try lifting one of those sandbags over there. Kurt gives it a shot, and as he puts his hands on the bag, he gets a strange sensation, almost like the sand drained a bit of his mana. Anyway, he lifts the bag, and since he is strong enough to do that, Kershell thinks he should be able to handle construction work. Kershell explains that the Margraviate of Tun is actively looking for laborers to assist with rebuilding the city walls. With her recommendation letter, Kurt should have no trouble securing a position. They're thankful for her assistance. Kurt doesn't waste any time and sets off right away to present himself to the Margraviate. Short later, the manager reads Kurt's letter asking to work there, but Kurt's body is not strong enough to handle construction work still, since he's short on workers, so he decides to give Kurt a shot. He tells him to mix up some cement and use it to repair the wall, and his pay will depend on how much he gets done. The manager says he'll be back later to check on his progress, warning Kurt that if he hasn't used at least half a barrel of cement in the next 3 hours, his pay is going to be low. Kurt feels the urge to ask a question, since the manager never brought up anything about infusing mana into the cement to make it stronger, but he chooses to keep quiet, assuming it's probably something everyone is expected to know. Even so, he's surprised that the daily quota is just half a barrel of cement. It feels far far too simple. So Kurt makes up his mind to use as much cement as possible before the manager comes back. When the manager returns, he's stunned to see that Kurt has already finished an entire section of the wall. Kurt apologizes, saying he could have done more, but he ran out of cement halfway through. The manager can hardly believe that Kurt actually repaired over a third of the western wall. Curious, he asks how Kurt even reached the top, and Kurt casually explains that he just tossed the cement up there and used a stick to smooth it out. Under normal circumstances, the manager would accuse Kurt of lying. Such a claim seems impossible, yet since Kurt clearly made it happen, there's no denying he's telling the truth. Curious, the manager asks how long Kurt intends to stay, and when Kurt replies he only needs the job for a week, the manager feels relieved. He informs Kurt that he's already done plenty for one day and can head home now. Since he doesn't have enough coins on hand to cover the full payment, he hands him a small pouch of money and promises to send him the rest through the guild. Kurt is stunned, as even the small pouch holds more money than he ever could have earned during his time with the hero party. Over the next few days, he keeps putting in steady work repairing the wall until out of nowhere the manager informs him that he's being let go. Confused, Kurt asks for the reason, and the manager explains that the wall repairs were intended to provide employment for people living in poverty. But Kurt is so efficient that if he continues working, there won't be any jobs left for the others. He doesn't hold any hard feelings toward Kurt or anything like that, but based on what he's witnessed, Kurt's ability is easily double S rank, maybe even triple S rank, so he believes Kurt would be much better off working somewhere else. He hands Kurt the remainder of his payment as compensation for the sudden dismissal and then walks away. However, Kurt completely misreads the situation and assumes the manager simply wanted to let him go because he was an awful worker. He heads back to the agency and meets with Garcelle to tell her he got fired, and it's still going to take a few days before Kurt can have his trade attributes appraised. Just then they hear a commotion over at the front desk, and it looks like a girl is trying to recruit someone, but the receptionist at the desk tells her that no one would agree to work under such terrible conditions with what she's offering. Even so, the girl keeps pressing the receptionist to find someone, and she's starting to draw attention with the commotion she's causing, prompting Garcelle to step in and see what's going on. Her coworker explains that the girl is looking to hire a miner to dig through an unexplored mountain, but she refuses to provide any upfront payment, insisting she'll only pay if the excavation ends up being successful. Garcelle agrees no one would ever agree to those terms, so she tries to convince the girl to hire investors to develop the mine, but the girl says she can't do that because if she doesn't pay the taxes by the end of the week, they'll empower Countermine. Just then Kurt walks up and says he is willing to take the job. After all, back in his village, he used to help with the mine excavation, so he has a decent amount of experience. Kershaw questions whether Kurt truly wants to accept this job, warning him the girl's proposed contract might leave him completely unpaid. Before Kurt can answer, the girl interrupts, admitting she'd actually hoped to recruit a muscular dwarf rather than a scrawny boy. She'd feel guilty assigning such work to Kurt, but any dwarf would demand at least silver up front, so since the girl doesn't have that much money, she reluctantly agrees to hire Kurt instead. As Kurt and the girl leave, Garcelle feels bad for letting him take that job because it probably isn't worth the time. Honestly, she thinks Kurt would be better off working in a brothel. While she's daydreaming about Kurt, her coworker gets her attention and tells her that a bank transfer just came through. Apparently it's the remaining money the manager promised to send to compensate for all the work Kurt did on the wall, and Kershaw was expecting a couple silver coins, but it's actually a check for gold, and that's a lot of money. The revelation that Kurt earned so much leaves her so stunned she trips over the sandbags on the floor. Her friend quickly warns her to be cautious. These aren't ordinary sandbags, but specialized tools for measuring mana capacity. They're designed to get heavier when touched by someone with substantial mana reserves. Most ordinary people don't affect them at all, which is why Kershaw can lift one without trouble. But then she recalls how Kurt had struggled painfully to move the same bag just days earlier, making her question whether he's really as average as he seems. Meanwhile, Kurt and Yulia are walking into the forest to get to her campsite, but when they get there, Kurt is a little concerned because there's only one tent. Yulia says the tent is big enough for the two of them to sleep together, but Kurt says he'd never be able to go to sleep if he's lying next to a cute girl like her. After hearing Kurt call her cute, Yulia gets upset because she thinks he's just trying to flatter her, but Kurt says he really does think that she's as cute. Yulia realizes that Kurt was being completely sincere, so she hands him a potato for dinner. It's nothing fancy, just a plain boiled potato, but it's been so long since anyone has prepared a meal for him that he truly values the gesture. He's also thankful that Yulia is sitting down to eat with him, especially since his former companions from the hero party never allowed him to share the same room with them during meals. Later that night, Kurt and Yulia go to bed, but Kurt is having a hard time sleeping because Yulia went to bed in her underwear. He will never be able to go to sleep around her, so he decides to leave the tent for the night and sleep outside. Once Kurt leaves the tent, Yulia opens her eyes because she was just pretending Pretending to fall asleep, she intentionally went to bed in her underwear to see if Kurt was the kind of person to assault her in her sleep, but now she knows he's a good guy. The following day, Yulia steps out of the tent and spots Kurt sleeping by a tree, which makes her feel a bit guilty for making him sleep outside, but then she notices that her jacket has been fixed. Kurt wakes up shortly after, so she asks if he's the one who fixed it, and he confirms that he is. She's genuinely impressed by his sewing skills and starts to question whether he's actually going to be any good at mining, but at this point it's too late to find a replacement, so they might as well get started. Kurt asks Yulia if she has decided on a location to begin mining yet, but she was just going to dig in random locations and pray to find some valuable ores. Kurt tells her she'll never find anything if she searches like that, and he happens to know a much more efficient way. He takes Yulia to a section of the mountain, and after looking around for a bit, he finds a rock full of gemstones. Yulia is stunned that he discovered it with such ease, but within minutes Kurt has managed to find every single gemstone in this part of the mountain. She can scarcely believe it. If she sells all these gems, her debt could finally be paid off. However, Kurt informs her that she can't sell them. Yulia understands his point, since Kurt was the one who located all of them, meaning he's entitled to the profits, but that wasn't his intention. He simply meant that the gems would be worth far more if he first transformed them into magic crystals. Kurt is right about that, but Elisha says there are only mages in the entire kingdom who are skilled enough to turn gems into magic crystals. But while she was saying all that, Kurt just finished turning a gem into a magic crystal. Yulia is too stunned to speak, because not only did Kurt create a magic crystal, but he did it instantly, when even the most experienced mages spend at least an hour to make a single magic crystal. Once Kurt finishes converting all the gems into crystals, he agrees to let Yulia take them to sell, so she sets off while he remains on the mountain to take care of a few things he still wants to complete. Yulia makes her way to the city's customs agency and informs them that she plans to sell some magic crystals in the royal capital. However, since magic crystals are extremely valuable, the knight on duty asks where she obtained them, not wanting to reveal any details. She simply flashes her royal family emblem, putting an end to his questions. This is somewhat of a bluff, considering she stopped working for the royal family some time ago, and they simply forgot to revoke her emblem, but it works nonetheless. The customs agent lets her use the teleportation circle to travel to the capital. Once she arrives, she makes her way to the shop of an old friend and tells Mimiko that she's got some magic gems she wants to sell. Mimiko takes a glance at the crystals, and at first they don't appear to be anything particularly valuable, but after examining them more carefully, she realizes they contain times the usual amount of mana, making each crystal worth gold. Yulia is left speechless, especially since Kurt handed her of them without much fuss. Mimiko casually hands her a pouch containing gold coins. However, before Elisha departs, Mimiko has two important conditions. First, she insists that Elisha must agree to exclusively sell such crystals at her shop. After all, allowing such potent crystals to spread freely without oversight could lead to catastrophe. Second, she demands to know the identity of the person who crafted these crystals. Yulia accepts the first condition, though she explains that she can't reveal the name of the crystal's creator to Mimiko, not without getting his permission first, since Mimiko serves as a court mage for the royal family. She attempts to leverage her authority, demanding that Yulia hand over the mysterious mage's details, but Yulia no longer works under the crown, meaning she has no duty to follow Mimiko's orders. Mimiko quickly understands that Elisha won't reveal Kurt's details, so she settles for requesting one thing: that Elisha